Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar. My name is Josh Kingett. I'm representing Ryla Cyber. We're a small team of cybersecurity professionals based here on the Isle of Man down in Ballasella. And in today's webinar, we're going to talk about how you can take responsibility for helping to secure your business against cybercrime. Now, as a result of the global pandemic, we've seen a surge in reliance upon technology in recent months. Now, this has allowed us to stay connected with friends and families, a copious amount of Kahoot quizzes and Zoom calls, and for some, the ability to continue working from home. It's therefore no surprise that the opportunities for cybercriminals has also risen, and they're going to constantly adopt and change their approach in order to successfully compromise your business. Reports are actually showing that since the beginning of the pandemic, people have seen an approximate increase of up to 400% in cyber attacks. Now, this is kind of unsurprising given the fact that cybercriminals are like a lot of ourselves. We're advised to stay at home and isolate. Now, these people have obviously got a lot more time on their hands and they're being asked to stay at home, so it's unsurprising that the number of attacks have also risen. Now, with a large percentage of these attacks being financially driven, it is imperative that whether it's your own business and you're working as an entrepreneur or an executive, or you're an employee within a company, that you take your responsibility seriously in helping to protect your company so that it doesn't get compromised. Now, to start off this webinar, I want to go over a few cybersecurity procedures that your company should already have in place as the minimum level of threat mitigation. The first of these being a cyber risk assessment. Now, these can be done as a self-assessment by yourself in your own time. They can be done remotely by a third party like ourselves at Ryla Cyber, or they can be done as an on-site assessment for an engineer to come and visit you on premise and conduct a risk assessment that way. These often give you a top-level breakdown of all the possible security risks that your company face and how best to mitigate these risks. The second point I wanted to touch on is regularly patching and updating your systems. This isn't just your operating systems, it's also any software that you may use or may not use. Now, old software should obviously be deprecated and removed from your systems, otherwise you might leave some holes in the back end of your system that could be vulnerable. Cybercriminals are constantly looking for ways in which to compromise and take advantage of these outdated versions, so it's imperative, again, that you make sure these things are constantly up to date. Now, moving on to the third point, everyone should already be familiar with things such as McAfee or Norton or Sophos. Packages like these, they are the basic antivirus, anti-malware suites, and they really give you very little insight into your own network or your endpoint traffic. Now, to tackle this problem, I would strongly recommend an endpoint management system. This is going to give you intelligent insight into all of your data and also give you some monitoring tools to look at what's happening. Most companies believe that they are already well protected because they have McAfee or Norton already in place, but that highlights their clear gap in their security posture because they don't have very much accessible or even useful information to go off. So that's why I definitely recommend an endpoint management suite for your system. Going on to the fourth point I wanted to talk about, it's important that you establish a comprehensive cyber awareness program. This is going to ensure that all of your employees are knowledgeable about the types of cybercrime they're most vulnerable to, also how to mitigate these risks and how best that they can report these incidents if they were to occur. And lastly, my fifth point on this topic in particular is email security. Now, again, most companies feel as though they're already well protected because they have a spam filter in place or a mail marshal in place. This is only going to do the basics. It may block some, but not all, potential spam emails, malicious links, or phishing attempts. So it's important that you have an effective email filtering system in place to capture everything that needs to be caught. Now, having an effective email filtering system in place is actually a lot more beneficial than it may sound. You're able to track trends such as which employees are receiving more spam than others, or which employee is more likely to click a phishing link. All of these things can be great insight into how better to protect your business and which individuals within a company may need further training in terms of their cyber awareness. So let's now take a look at a case study. A more recent example is Twitter, and we're going to look at how the potential fault of one employee led to the compromise of one of the world's largest and probably most used social media networks. Now, this hack wasn't just unprecedented, it was a shocking revelation that a company so large was so ill-equipped to handle a cyber attack. Now, Twitter is probably considered the backbone of internet news, government policy, and any market-moving trends on the internet. So it was a real shock for the public to see such a company being under attack in this way. Now, it's reported that the group or individual behind this attack used a series of social engineering attacks targeted towards employees' mobile phones using spear phishing. This then gave the hackers access to an administrative panel of some sort that allows Twitter employees to manage user accounts. Now, screenshots of this supposed panel were actually leaked onto Twitter following the aftermath of this hack or compromise, but Twitter later took down these screenshots, claiming that it violated their terms and policies on sharing private or confidential imagery. Now, a panel like this is going to enable a user to do everyday tasks or key operations within Twitter, everything from an account suspension to an account being verified or accessing any direct messages that that account may have. What this admin tool also allows is for a hacker, whether it be a rogue, a compromised, or an insider working within the company, allows them to come in sideways and use these tools to cause havoc. Now, it still remains unclear what the motivation was behind this attack. A lot of people believe it to be financially motivated. Accounts such as the US former Vice President Joe Biden, the Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, SpaceX and Tesla's CEO Elon Musk, and also Apple's own company account, posting tweets requesting users to send them money in the form of cryptocurrency to a certain address. And that's why most people believe that this could be financially motivated. Now, Twitter actually made a statement following the compromise, and I want to quote, "This was a striking reminder of how important each person is on our team in protecting our service. Again, emphasizing the fact and importance of when you're an employee, you hold some level of responsibility in keeping your company safe from malicious attacks like these." Now, let's go over a few things that you can do as an employee to help keep your company safe from malicious attempts. Now, you're going to hear it time and time again. I know it's easy to remember just one password, but please don't use the same password for different systems within a company. This is such a common mistake by employees within a company and often leads to the most horrendous cyber attacks. Because once they're into one system and compromise one account, if you're using the same password for different levels of access into different systems, then that cyber criminal is just going to take advantage of that, try the same password across each, and gain more access across your network. Secondly, two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, if possible, should be used in every case. Now, lastly, and this doesn't just apply to employees, it applies to anyone working within a company or indeed not working, please clue yourself up on the different types of phishing attacks that may be posing a threat to you. Now, Ryla Cyber have their Facebook page. It's just called Ryla Cyber. They have a great source of material there for you to look up on, detailing all the different types of phishing attacks. Oxia also have their source of content on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. And I'd strongly recommend you go and check either resource to clue yourself up more about the different types of phishing attacks and how best to mitigate those risks. You should be provided with adequate cybersecurity awareness training. And if this isn't the case in your company, then please raise this issue because it's important. Now, before I talk more about what you can do as a director or a senior executive within a company, I want to talk more about an issue that's a bit closer to home on the Isle of Man, and that's the Cayman national compromise that happened last year, sort of around the 19th of November 2019. Okay, let's just pause right here. Now, between the time in which I recorded and edited that webinar last week, I've actually gone ahead and thought it'd be worthwhile to meet with Kurt Rusin, who's the head of IT and operations at Cayman National. Not only to get his green light on what I'm saying in the webinar is okay, but also to get a better understanding as to what actually happened to ensure that the information I'm regurgitating from reports I found online isn't misleading information. One of the biggest points I want to take away from the meeting with Kurt is the sophistication of the attack. These attackers sat on their network for over 5 years. This wasn't just a quick job or something that was done over a weekend. This was most likely a state-funded operation that lasted 5 to 7 years. Most of that time was actually sat quietly on the network, just reading, studying daily activities and files, and not actually causing any stirs or disturbances on the network. Think of it like a nuclear arms race. There are constantly people who are going to try and compromise systems, fighting against those who are constantly trying to protect systems. And it's a lot easier to try and find a hole in something than it is to try and find a solution which has no holes in it. Tools for offensive capabilities, with the help of the dark web or state funding, are becoming more versatile and sophisticated, largely outweighing some measures of protection. Whilst Cayman National is regulated and did have all of the security measures in place that it was expected of them, they still fell victim to this attack, and there's definitely lessons to be learned from this. Although I can't talk about the specifics as to what actually happened, I can tell you that there was a third-party provider of security hardware which had an exploitable vulnerability of which the attackers took advantage of. They then quietly sat on the network for a number of years and trying their best to cover their tracks. It wasn't until Cayman National had found they were on their network that these hackers turned around and released 2 terabytes of information out into the public domain. Most of this being balance information or account details to a number of customers. Cayman were deservedly praised for how well they handled this compromise and how transparent they were with both the customers and government. And for that, they actually gained a lot of reputation and trust from their clients in how they managed to handle this attack. It's worth knowing that this attack could have happened to anyone. Cayman National were on a list of probably thousands of companies in which had this same piece of security hardware with the same vulnerability. And banks over here knew that they were just the lucky ones that weren't targeted. So they were very quick to lend a helping hand to Cayman National in case they needed any assistance, and also to learn from what Cayman National had gone through so that they could apply that to any attack that they might have suffered in the future. Now, the main takeaway from this case study is that no matter whether you have a multi-vendor security layered approach, as Cayman National did, there is always going to be an ongoing fighting battle with those wanting to steal confidential information. And it goes to show the lengths at which these individuals are going to in order to take that from you. The last quick point I want to mention before I teleport you back to the previous webinar where I've got longer hair and a fuller beard is that please ensure you're not behind the curve with cybersecurity and you're taking this issue seriously and investing accordingly. And I'm hoping you can see from this Cayman National case study just how important of an issue it is and the constant fight between those wanting to protect and those wanting to steal your information. Now, talking as a company director, here are some things that you can do to better protect your business. Now, checking email encryption. First of all, it's very easy to check your inbound email encryption. However, your outbound mail is a little bit more difficult to check. Now, we here at Ryla Cyber, we have a free tool that you can use that's readily available for anyone watching. All you have to do is send us an email at dmarc, and that is spelled D-M-A-R-C, at emailsecurity.im, and you'll receive an automatic response within a few seconds telling you whether your outgoing mail is encrypted and you're not vulnerable. So I'm going to reiterate a point I made earlier, more targeted towards the directors, is that you need to conduct regular cyber risk assessments. Again, these can be done as self-assessments remotely or on-site. It really doesn't matter. However, an on-site assessment is going to go into greater depth usually and probably take 1 to 2 business days to complete. Now, a cyber risk assessment, as I mentioned earlier, it's a top-level breakdown of all potential cyber risks that your company are vulnerable to, as well as a list of solutions on how best to mitigate these risks. Now, I can't really stress this enough. You need to be constantly updating, reviewing, testing your cyber incident procedure. In the event that you are to ever fall victim to a cyber attack, you know the correct procedures to follow, and also your employees know exactly what to do if they were to fall victim. Now, it may seem like a no-brainer, but all of your data needs to be stored in a secure location, usually within a data center, in a trusted location by a trusted provider like ourselves, and not just stored in any public cloud. It might seem like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many companies fall victim to this. Now, to finish off this webinar, I want you to be asking yourself a few questions. Does my company have the appropriate cyber intelligence tools in order to prevent a cyber attack from happening, or at the very least detect it before it's about to happen? Does my MSP, or in some cases my internal IT team, do they have the resources on hand capable of dealing with a cyber attack? And are they monitoring your traffic 24/7, 365 days a year? And lastly, I want to ask you the question, the viewer watching this webinar right now, do you feel confident enough to be able to identify a phishing attack, whether it be through the phone or an email, And would you know how to properly respond to that and raise that issue? On behalf of us all here at Ryla Cyber, I want to thank you for watching this short webinar as part of the CYBERISLE event. I want to thank Oxia for the great opportunity to present to you at this event, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for listening.